I hadn't planned to be caught staring, but there she was, framed in the doorway, sunlight spilling around her like she'd stepped out of some half-forgotten dream. I froze mid-step, wrench in hand, trying not to look too obvious as she watched me. She didn't move, not even a twitch of the lips, but the air between us had thickened, and I could feel it pressing against my chest. Her name is Elena. I've known her all my life, in the abstract sense, her presence in the neighborhood, her laugh carried across the yard, stories told in passing, but right now, right here, she was a living pulse. Confident, yet somehow fragile in a way that made you want to protect her. Her hand rested lightly on the gate, fingers tracing the wood almost without thought, and when her eyes met mine, something electric sparked across the space between us. I bent down to tighten a hinge, trying to focus on the metal, the screw slipping just slightly in my palm. But my attention kept snapping back to her. The way her hair caught the sunlight, the gentle arch of her neck, the soft crease near her eyes that deepened whenever she smiled, tiny imperfections that made her entirely human and entirely irresistible. "You really shouldn't be out here alone," she said, voice low, teasing. Not a scold, not quite a warning, but something that made me lean a little closer despite myself. I swallowed. "It's just the gate. I'll have it fixed in a minute." Her gaze lingered longer than it needed to. She stepped forward, just enough that the scent of her, something warm, like vanilla and sun-baked linen, washed over me. My hand itched to brush against hers, not the casual accidental touch, but a deliberate one that would cross some invisible line. She shifted slightly, the air moving between us charged, and for a moment, the world narrowed to her eyes, the curve of her hand, the soft cadence of her breath. I adjusted the hinge again, hands trembling just a little. She tilted her head, almost imperceptibly, and I felt like she was inviting me to speak, or maybe daring me to. I opened my mouth and stopped. There were no words that could capture the way she made the sunlight feel hotter, the air heavier, the quiet more pronounced. I wanted to say something clever, something that would hide my racing heart, but all that came out was a soft, she smiled then, slow, deliberate, not quite reaching her eyes. She didn't finish my sentence for me. She didn't need to. The tension between us did it all. I could feel her pulse, or maybe it was mine, or maybe the air itself had become a living thing, thrumming between us. I imagined my fingers brushing hers, imagined the heat of her palm against mine, and the thought made my chest tighten. "Why lock it?" she began, stepping even closer, her hand brushing the edge of mine, not enough to be obvious, but enough to make me aware of every nerve ending in my arm. "When I want you in?" Her words hung in the air, soft, teasing, almost dangerous. I couldn't tell if she meant the gate or me. The question lodged in my throat as I looked up, and she held my gaze just a second too long. The quiet that followed wasn't comfortable. It was electric, charged, and impossible to ignore. Then, just as I was about to speak, to reach, to do something, there was a sudden sound from the house behind her, a door swinging open. My breath caught. Her eyes flicked over her shoulder, and the spell shattered like glass. But the tension didn't break. It only shifted, leaving me aching for what I couldn't yet have, standing frozen, wrench in hand, while she glanced back at me with that same, unspoken promise. I didn't know how long I stood there after the door slammed, wrench in hand, the air between us still crackling. Elena's glance back lingered in my mind, heavier than the sun, warmer than anything I'd felt in months, or maybe years. I told myself to focus on the gate, to finish the job and retreat, but my eyes kept drifting to her, to the way her hair fell across her shoulder, golden and soft in the late afternoon light. "You always work like this?" she asked, voice casual but with that subtle edge that made me aware of her presence closer than anyone else ever had been. I flinched, trying to sound nonchalant. "Like, what?" "Focused. Distracted. Or, I don't know, nervous." She tilted her head, just a fraction, as if daring me to lie. I cleared my throat. "I'm careful." The word sounded hollow, even to me. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was something there, something I couldn't name, maybe regret, maybe longing. She's not the type to give herself away easily. I knew that instinctively. I noticed it in the way she brushed her fingers along the gate's wood, lingering, hesitant. There's a story behind her hesitation, I realized, a history that's never fully shared. I had my own. Nights spent in small apartments, windows cracked open to the hum of distant traffic, thinking about people I'd wanted but couldn't keep, or who couldn't want me. I'm not proud of it. I'd never said it aloud. Loneliness had become familiar, but somehow, here, near her, it felt almost unbearable. You never ask questions, she said suddenly, stepping closer, just enough that her shoulder brushed mine. A spark shot straight to my chest. I jerked slightly, feigning adjustment to the hinge. About what? I managed, trying to keep my voice even. About me, she replied, her breath brushing the side of my face, soft, unintentional, electric. Do you ever wonder who I was, before all this? I glanced at her, seeing not just the graceful woman before me but the years she'd carried quietly, small regrets, hidden laughter, private ache. Sometimes, I said. I guess I imagine. My fingers lingered on the hinge longer than needed, as if the metal could anchor me against the pull of her presence. She laughed softly, a warm, low sound that made my chest tighten. Imagine what? She pressed, teasing but not demanding. I wanted to tell her, but what could I say? That I imagine her alone, that I imagine this, the closeness, the warmth of her hand, the way she looks at me when she thinks I'm not noticing? That I imagine her in ways I shouldn't? She caught my hesitation, or maybe she just knew. Her hand drifted along the gate, brushing my forearm lightly. The touch was fleeting, almost accidental, but it lingered in my skin long after. She pulled back, just enough to give space, just enough to make me ache for more. You're careful, she said again, this time softer, almost a whisper. But some things, you don't control. I swallowed. The words hit me, more than I expected. I wanted to reach out, to brush my fingers along hers, to tell her she didn't have to stop, but there's risk here. People would notice. I would notice. And yet, in the way her gaze held mine, in the way she stood close and then pulled away just slightly, I felt some unspoken understanding forming between us. A delicate, fragile bridge we weren't ready to cross but could feel spanning the space between. For a moment, we just stood there, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of her perfume, hear the quiet rustle of her shirt against her shoulder. The world beyond the yard disappeared. The hinge was forgotten, the screws neglected. There was only the electricity of our nearness, the unspoken questions, the tentative brush of fingers that made everything heavier than it should be. And then she stepped back, just a little, but not all the way. Her eyes held mine, and I understood, no words were needed. The silence itself had said everything. The afternoon sunlight had shifted, painting the yard in gold and shadow, and I was still at the gate, hands lingering on the worn wood as if it could somehow steady the storm in my chest. Elena moved closer again, quiet, deliberate, and I could feel the heat of her body even before she spoke. Be careful with that, she murmured, brushing her hand lightly against mine, not quite touching, but enough to make my pulse stutter. I swallowed, trying to force myself to focus. But the hinge didn't matter anymore. I could feel her gaze tracing me, assessing, daring. Every small movement, her shoulder brushing my arm, the faint catch in her breath, was a reminder that this, whatever it was, shouldn't exist. And yet, here it was, impossible to deny. A sudden sound froze us both. The screen door rattled, and I turned just in time to see her nephew stepping into the yard, phone in hand, distracted. My heart lurched. Elena stiffened, almost imperceptibly, and for a second I could have sworn we both wished we were invisible. Hey, he called, waving at the house behind us. Did you? Oh, his eyes flicked between us, a question unspoken in his glance. Elena smiled quickly, too quickly, a practiced mask that didn't reach her eyes. Just fixing the gate, she said lightly, stepping slightly between us and me, her hand brushing my back in the most fleeting, protective gesture. The contact was brief, almost accidental, but my stomach knotted, and I realized just how desperate I'd been to feel it. Once he wandered off, we exhaled almost simultaneously. I wanted to laugh nervously, to shake off the tension, but instead I just leaned against the gate, aware of every inch of her near me. The air had thickened again, heavy with everything we weren't saying. "You're careful," she said again, softer this time. Her eyes searched mine, a quiet question buried beneath the surface. I could feel the pull of her gaze, and the urge to close the small gap between us. "Yeah," I whispered. My fingers brushed against hers, this time slightly longer, almost accidental, almost intentional. She didn't pull away, not fully, and my chest tightened. Her hand moved a fraction closer, her warmth radiating against my arm, and I wanted to lean in, wanted to see if the space between our lips could vanish. But I didn't. Neither did she. Instead, we lingered in that suspended moment, breaths shallow, hearts hammering in tandem, each of us caught between desire and caution. "You should, maybe go inside," I said, my voice betraying my hesitation. The words sounded absurd even as I spoke them. She shook her head, a slow, deliberate movement. "Not yet," she said, almost a whisper. "Not while you're still here." Her hand brushed against mine again, this time a little firmer, and I felt the pull of everything we couldn't name. The yard seemed smaller, the sunlight warmer, the shadows sharper. My chest ached, and her gaze held me in place, daring me to cross some invisible boundary I wasn't sure we were ready to face. I wanted to ask her if she felt it too. Wanted to admit the pull, the longing, the almost impossible draw between us. But instead, we just stood there, closer than ever, fingers brushing, breaths mingling, the world beyond the yard fading into nothing. And yet, even as we hovered on the edge of everything, the guilt, the hesitation, the weight of what others might think pressed down. But somehow, impossibly, we didn't pull away. We were tethered together, inches apart, caught in that dangerous, delicious pause that neither of us could, or wanted to, break. The evening had folded into itself, the sky bruised purple and gold, and the yard felt smaller with every heartbeat. I could no longer pretend the pull between us was harmless. Each glance, each accidental brush of hands, was a spark threatening to ignite. "Elena," I said, voice lower than I intended, almost swallowed by the hum of cicadas. She didn't answer immediately, she just tilted her head, watching me, waiting, and that silence felt heavier than words. I stepped closer, daring, reckless, though my mind screamed caution. Her perfume, soft, familiar, dangerous, wrapped around me, and I could feel her warmth brushing against my chest. My hand lifted before I even thought, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Her eyes softened, blinked, lingered on me in a way that made my chest tighten unbearably. "I can't stop," I whispered, barely audible. "Not thinking about this. About you." Her lips parted slightly, and I saw that flicker of hesitation in her eyes, the same hesitation I felt mirrored back at me. She leaned just a fraction closer, almost imperceptibly, so that her shoulder brushed mine. Every nerve in my body screamed, every rational thought drowned in the weight of wanting her. "You don't, you shouldn't," she breathed, voice quivering slightly. There was the fear. The restraint. The acknowledgement that what we were doing, even in these stolen moments, was dangerous in its own quiet way. I reached for her hand, tangling our fingers just lightly, teasing, testing. She didn't pull away. The contact was electric, fragile, a promise and a warning at once. My lips were only inches from hers, and I could feel her breath, soft, warm, brushing my skin. I wanted, needed, to close that distance, to let everything I felt spill over. "I've wanted this," I admitted, almost against my will, voice breaking slightly. "For longer than I should have." And I can't. Her hand lifted to my chest, pressing gently as if to stop me, and my heart lurched. You can't, she repeated, almost a plea, almost a confession of her own desire. Her eyes searched mine, vulnerable and daring all at once, and I realized we were balanced on a knife's edge. One step closer, and everything changes. I swallowed, hands shaking slightly, trying to anchor myself, to remember reason, but reason had abandoned me. Her closeness was intoxicating, her warmth, her scent, the way her fingers grazed mine, the tiny shiver that ran through her when I brushed against her. Every sense screamed that this was forbidden and irresistible in equal measure. She leaned a little further, and I could feel the faint press of her body against mine, soft, deliberate. My lips hovered near hers, tasting the anticipation in the air. My pulse thundered in my ears, my fingers tight on hers. The world beyond the yard didn't exist. It was just us, suspended in a moment that couldn't last. Then she whispered something that made my stomach twist. Not a rejection, not a consent, just a line suspended between want and caution. Do you dare? The words hung there, trembling in the twilight, daring me to cross the last boundary. I could feel her breath on my lips, our hearts thundering in tandem, and I knew that if I moved now, if I let myself act, there would be no turning back. And yet, before anything could happen, the screen door banged open behind us, startling us both. My chest heaved. Her eyes flicked toward the sound, a mix of frustration and longing, and I froze, inches from her, every instinct screaming toward her. Everything had changed, yet nothing had happened. And somehow, that made the tension almost unbearable. The next morning, sunlight slanted across the kitchen in shards, and I found Elena already there, leaning against the counter, coffee mug in hand. She looked different somehow. Still elegant, still impossible, but with a shadow in her eyes I hadn't seen before. You left the gate, she said casually, but her tone carried an edge that made my stomach tighten. Unlocked. I didn't think anyone would, I started, but she cut me off with a small shake of her head. It's not that, she murmured, setting her mug down, the clink of ceramic startlingly loud in the quiet room. She hesitated, fingers brushing along the edge of the counter. It's, someone saw us. My chest dropped. Saw us? She nodded slowly, eyes flicking toward me, then down, then back. Her niece. She came by yesterday. She noticed you, and me. She didn't say anything, but, you have to understand. We can't be careless. I felt a cold jolt of guilt and something else, something sharper. The attraction, the pull I'd been trying to reason with, twisted tighter inside me. I stepped closer, careful, conscious of the tension crackling between us. My hand brushed hers as I reached to gesture, and she didn't pull away, not fully, just enough that the contact sent a shiver up my arm. I didn't realize, I began, voice low, hesitant, as if speaking could undo what had been seen. That anyone would notice. Her lips twitched, almost a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She leaned a fraction closer, shoulder brushing mine, warmth radiating through the small gap. No one notices, usually, she said softly. But now it's different. And maybe that's good. Or dangerous. I can't decide. Her hand lifted, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. The motion was so intimate, so deliberate, that my pulse caught in my throat. I wanted to lean in. I wanted to let my lips follow her fingers, to close the distance we'd been dancing around for weeks. But the warning bell of consequence rang louder than desire. Why, tell me now? I asked, voice rougher than I intended. My thumb grazed hers, accidentally, or maybe intentionally, and she froze, eyes wide for a heartbeat, then exhaled slowly. Because, she whispered, voice trembling just slightly, I can't keep pretending. I feel something I shouldn't. And now, with someone else aware, her gaze caught mine, fierce and fragile all at once. It matters more than it did yesterday. The words hit me like a storm. Everything we'd been tiptoeing around, the longing, the guilt, the forbidden pull, solidified into something almost unbearable. My chest tightened, hands trembling slightly, and I realized I could no longer pretend to resist the gravity between us. Her shoulder brushed mine again, this time more intentionally, the contact lingering just a fraction too long. My heart hammered, every nerve ending alert. The risk, the fear of being discovered, the weight of social boundaries, the pull of what we wanted, made my blood roar. I started, voice breaking, I feel it too. Her eyes softened, a flicker of relief, of tension, of daring. She stepped just a fraction closer, the air between us nearly electric. Fingers brushed, hands almost intertwined, breaths mingling in the quiet kitchen. The world beyond the room, consequences, judgment, the casual intrusion of ordinary life, felt impossibly distant. Only her, only this impossible closeness, only the fragile tether of want and fear that bound us. And then she made the decision for both of us, leaning closer, her lips hovering near mine, eyes searching mine for a signal I could barely give. The tension coiled tighter than ever, the room charged, and I realized, whatever happened next, nothing would be the same. "Are we really going to do this?" she whispered, breath warm against my cheek. The question hung between us, taut, daring, and irresistible. The kitchen felt impossibly small, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the floor. Elena was there, just a breath away, and I could feel every tiny shift of her weight against mine, the faint press of her shoulder, the warmth radiating from her. My fingers brushed hers again, this time lingering, unwilling to let go. Her eyes held mine, searching, daring, hesitant. "Are you going to step back?" she whispered, her voice low, almost a sigh, or maybe a plea. I shook my head, though my heart raced like a drum. "I don't want to," I admitted, voice trembling more than I expected. Not like this. Not with you." Her lips twitched, the faintest shadow of a smile. She reached up, brushing a stray strand of hair from my forehead, and the contact sent a jolt through me, sharper than anything I'd felt. The space between us was almost unbearable, the tiny gap between our faces felt like miles, yet every second stretched, heavy with possibility. "I've tried to be careful," she murmured, her hand still hovering against my chest, not pressing, not pulling back, just existing there. "I've tried to pretend that this, us, couldn't happen." Her gaze flicked to my lips, then back to my eyes, and I could see the fight in her, the want and the restraint warring within her. I swallowed, unable to form words that mattered. Instead, I closed the last of that distance, letting my forehead rest lightly against hers. She didn't flinch, she only leaned in a fraction, letting me feel the warmth of her breath, the pulse of her heartbeat. "It's messy," I whispered. "I know it's wrong in a lot of ways. But I can't step away. Not now." She exhaled, a soft, tremulous sound, and I felt her hand finally press gently into my side. Every nerve in my body hummed. The fear, the hesitation, the weight of social expectation, it was all there, but it didn't matter. "Not here. Not now." "I don't care about safe," she admitted, voice barely audible. "I care about you. About us. About this." That single confession shattered the last of the tension holding me back. I leaned closer, letting my lips brush hers, not a kiss yet, but a promise of the surrender to come. She didn't pull away. Instead, her hand slid over mine, fingers tangling, grounding us both in the truth we had tried to ignore. The world outside the kitchen, the judgments, the whispers, the consequences, faded to nothing. There was only the warmth of her body, the weight of her gaze, the silent, electric understanding passing between us. We didn't need words. Everything that had been held back, everything that had been feared, everything that had been longed for, was crystallized in that moment of suspended closeness. Her shoulder against mine, the brush of her fingers, the shallow rise and fall of her breath, it was chaotic, raw, human. "I'm here," she whispered, finally, voice low, certain. "If you are." "I'm here," I said, echoing her, heart hammering, chest tight. And in that instant, everything changed. The hesitation, the tension, the careful steps backward, all dissolved into the simplicity of choice, to surrender, to want, to finally acknowledge the gravity between us. We didn't kiss, not yet, but the promise hung between us, taut and undeniable. Every glance, every touch, every breath was charged with understanding. We knew each other now, fully, completely, and there was no turning back. The evening settled around the yard, soft and golden, and for the first time since I'd arrived, the world felt quiet enough for us to exist without fear. Elena leaned against the gate, her fingers brushing mine, and I realized how long we'd been circling each other, dancing around a truth we both knew but hesitated to name. "I was worried," she admitted quietly, eyes tracing mine, soft and honest. "About everything. What people would think. About us." I shook my head gently, thumb stroking the back of her hand. "I don't care," I said simply. "Not anymore. Only about this. About you." Her lips curved into a small, relieved smile. She stepped closer, letting her head rest lightly against my shoulder. The warmth of her, the weight of her, the familiar scent that had haunted me for weeks, it was grounding, almost sacred. My arm went around her, drawing her in slowly, as if to memorize the moment in every detail, the tilt of her head, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the gentle rise and fall of her breath. "I guess, we don't have to pretend anymore," she whispered, voice trembling just slightly. "We can just be." I pressed my forehead to hers, feeling the pulse of her heartbeat sync with mine. The age gap, the whispered doubts, the stolen moments of hesitation, it all seemed to shrink in significance when measured against the gravity of this closeness. Her warmth against me was proof enough that desire and connection didn't need justification, only acknowledgement. Her hand slipped into mine, fingers intertwining naturally, and I marveled at the simplicity of it. No tension, no hesitation, just human closeness finally allowed to exist. The sun dipped lower, painting the yard in molten amber, and we just stood there, savoring the silence, letting the world fall away. "You feel like home," she murmured, a small laugh following, almost shy, almost embarrassed. "Even though we shouldn't, in theory." I smiled, brushing my thumb over her knuckles. "Then let's not think about theory," I said softly. "Let's just be here." We leaned together, shoulders touching, foreheads pressed in quiet affirmation. Her breath was warm against my cheek, her fingers lightly squeezing mine, and the tension that had haunted us for weeks evaporated into something tender, something real. Every fear, every hesitation, every glance that lingered too long, all of it led to this, a shared, quiet certainty that we were exactly where we were meant to be. She tilted her head slightly, letting me brush my lips against her forehead, a small gesture, intimate, protective, and full of meaning. "I think," she whispered, voice low and steady, "that this, us, is worth it." "I think so too," I said, heart lighter than it had been in months. "Completely." We didn't need to speak more. We didn't need grand declarations or dramatic gestures. The small touches, the closeness, the warmth of being together, all of it said everything. Her hand in mine, the curve of her shoulder against mine, our breaths mingling in the quiet evening, it was enough. And for the first time in a long while, I knew that this, whatever it was, messy and human and impossible, was ours. Fully ours. We lingered there as the sky darkened, letting the world wait outside the gate. Finally, perfectly, quietly, we belonged to each other. 19.